Everyone thinks Vikings died and went to Valhalla. But what if that was a lie? What if most Vikings were never meant to go there at all? This isn't just mythology, this is the dark truth of what they feared after death. We've all heard the myth. A fearless Viking charges into battle, sword raised, death in his eyes. He falls, but not in despair, because he knows what comes next, Valhalla. An eternal hall of glory, where the brave feast with the gods, where the mead never runs dry, where warriors fight all day and party all night, waiting for their final call to battle at Ragnarok. Sounds epic, right? But here's the thing. What if that version of Valhalla is mostly a lie? What if the image we've built around it, of endless glory, heavenly reward, divine justice, was never what the Vikings truly believed? Because as you dig deeper into Norse mythology, the picture gets darker, weirder, more human. The truth is, most Vikings didn't expect to go to Valhalla. Many feared Helheim, others prayed for Fólkvangr, and most didn't even fully understand where their souls would go. Valhalla was exclusive, not promised, and not even considered a paradise by all. In fact, to some, it wasn't heaven. It was a preparation for war, again, forever. No rest, no peace, just battle, blood, and waiting to die again at the end of the world. So why has Valhalla survived as the most iconic vision of Viking afterlife? Because it was a myth designed to inspire obedience, glorify death, and unite a violent culture under the banner of purpose. But the question still stands. Did Vikings truly believe in it? Or did they die for a dream someone else gave them? This is the story the sagas don't tell. And it begins with a lie carved in steel and a promise whispered before battle. What was Valhalla really? Forget the modern fantasy. Forget the Hollywood visuals of golden halls and heroic cheers. Valhalla wasn't paradise. It was a war camp. In Norse mythology, Valhalla, Old Norse, Valhöll, means Hall of the Slain. It stood in Asgard, not heaven, but the divine realm of the Aesir gods. And at the center of it all, Odin, the All-Father, the one-eyed god of wisdom, death, and war. Valhalla was his domain, not reward. It was a strategic military stronghold, a place where he gathered only the strongest warriors, those he handpicked through the Valkyries. They didn't go there to rest, they went there to train, to fight each other every day.
Until the end of the world. That's right. Valhalla wasn't an eternal afterlife of peace. It was boot camp for Ragnarok, the final cosmic war between gods and giants. Every warrior in Valhalla was a soldier in Odin's private army. And that begs a serious question. Was it truly a reward? Or just conscription for the apocalypse? Because while mortals may have dreamed of drinking in golden halls, the myth itself tells a harsher truth. You didn't win anything by dying and going to Valhalla. You just joined the next war. And that war? It would end with the death of the gods, the destruction of the world, and the collapse of everything. So ask yourself, would you really want to spend eternity in Valhalla if the only peace you'd ever get was after the final battle, where even gods would die? Who actually got into Valhalla? Here's where the myth breaks for real. Not all Vikings went to Valhalla. In fact, most didn't. Despite what modern pop culture says, Valhalla wasn't some default afterlife for all Norse warriors. It was invitation only. And the criteria? Brutal, strict, mysterious. You had to die in battle. Not just any battle, a death that was glorious, brave, and witnessed. But even that wasn't enough, because according to the myth, only half of those worthy warriors went to Valhalla. The other half? They went to Fólkvangr, the field ruled by Freyja. That's right. Freyja, the goddess of love, fertility, and war, got first pick of the slain. Not Odin, Freyja. She claimed half of the heroic dead for herself, and she didn't send them to battle again. She offered peace, comfort, and light. So now the question becomes, why is Valhalla the one we remember? Why did Odin's version of the afterlife, the one filled with endless combat, overshadow Freyja's Hall of Peace? Because Valhalla wasn't built to reward, it was built to recruit. It glorified death on the battlefield. It inspired courage in hopeless odds. It made dying in war feel like victory.
And in a culture where survival was brutal, that was a powerful myth to believe in. But again, not everyone believed it. If you died of old age, sickness, accident, or even execution, you didn't go to Valhalla. You likely ended up in Helheim, ruled by Hel, the daughter of Loki. So for every Viking with dreams of feasting in Odin's hall, there were dozens more who knew their fate was colder, quieter, and much more uncertain. Valhalla wasn't a universal belief. It was a privilege, a myth for the few. What was the hidden role of the Valkyries? We imagine Valkyries as angelic, beautiful women flying through the skies, gently lifting fallen warriors into the heavens. But in Norse mythology, they were far more terrifying. The word Valkyria means chooser of the slain. They didn't save lives, they selected who would die. That's right. They were agents of death, riding with spears and armor, appearing on blood-soaked battlefields not to heal, but to harvest. And the worst part? Sometimes they caused the death. Old sagas speak of Valkyries influencing battles, turning the tide, driving warriors to madness just to make sure the right soul was chosen for Valhalla. They were Odin's enforcers, not saints, not saviors. They served a war god, and their job was to supply him with soldiers. They didn't care about mercy. They didn't care about peace. They were sent to fill Odin's hall with warriors ready to die again at Ragnarok. Some stories even describe Valkyries as weavers of fate, spinning intestines into war banners, using skulls as weights, and singing while men screamed. They were terrifying, ethereal, inevitable. To see one above your battlefield wasn't a blessing. It was a sign your fate was sealed. And what's more chilling? You didn't choose them. They chose you. Not for who you were, not for how you lived, but for how you died. So while modern art paints Valkyries as winged beauties, the truth is much colder. They were death in female form. To understand the Viking afterlife, you first have to understand something far more complicated. They didn't believe in just one soul. Here are just a few of those soul parts. 1. The huger, your consciousness, your thought. It could move independently of your body. 2. The hamr, your shape, your outward form, your appearance, your ability to shapeshift, your presence in the world. 3. The Fylgja, your guardian spirit. Usually appearing as an animal, the Fylgja was linked to your fate. It followed you, reflected you, and sometimes warned you of death approaching.
4. The Hamingia, your luck and legacy, the most mysterious of all. This soul part was inherited, passed down through families, tied to your reputation and fame after death. Lose your Hamingia, and you lose your fate, your strength, even your place in the afterlife. So when a Viking died, not all parts of them went to Valhalla or Helheim or anywhere. Some stayed behind. Some lingered near their descendants. Some became ghosts. Some faded. And some were reborn in family bloodlines. Death wasn't a door. It was a fracturing, an unraveling of the self. This made the afterlife terrifyingly uncertain. Because it wasn't just about bravery. It was about which parts of you survived and where they ended up. So when a Viking faced death, he wasn't asking, "Will I go to Valhalla?" He was wondering, what parts of me will remain and who will remember them? You could fall in battle, but if it was from cowardice, accident, or betrayal, you weren't going to Valhalla. In fact, the Valkyries were choosy. They didn't scoop up everyone who fell. They chose those whose deaths held meaning to Odin, those who would be useful in Ragnarok. And here's the brutal truth. Many Viking deaths didn't qualify. You died of disease, you went to Helheim, you slipped and drowned, same fate. You were too old to lift a blade, not even considered. So where did the idea of die in battle equal Valhalla come from? It was cultural propaganda. It pushed young men to be fearless. It gave warriors something to believe in as they charged into hopeless odds. And most of all, it gave Viking leaders a way to create unquestioning loyalty. Because if the only path to eternal glory was to die fighting, why would you ever hesitate to kill or die on command? But for those who truly understood the myths, Valhalla was never a right. It was a recruitment, a divine draft pick for Odin's last army. You didn't just have to die,
You had to impress. And if you didn't, you faced the cold silence of Helheim. What was the fear of Helheim? If Valhalla was the dream, then Helheim was the nightmare. But not in the way you might think. Helheim wasn't a place of fire and brimstone. It wasn't a punishment in the Christian sense. There were no demons torturing souls. Helheim was worse. It was eternal stillness. Ruled by Hel, the cold and half-dead daughter of Loki, this realm was where the unworthy, the forgotten, and the ordinary dead went. No golden halls, no feasts, no fighting, just a gray eternity. Cold winds, mist-covered paths, a skyless void, and silence so deep it felt like a second death. You didn't suffer in pain, you suffered in meaninglessness. To the Viking mind, this was the true horror, to die and be forgotten, to drift through Helheim with no fame, no glory, no songs sung in your name. Some believed that Helheim could be peaceful, a place of rest for those who lived humbly. But warriors, to them, Helheim was failure. Not because it was evil, but because it was empty. No legacy, no second chance, no glory. Just the quiet company of the countless dead forever. And yet, statistically, most Vikings ended up there because most didn't die in battle. Most weren't chosen by Valkyries. Most were farmers, traders, mothers, children, elders. And so, for the vast majority of Norse souls, Helheim wasn't a punishment,
It was the inevitable destination. And that's what made Valhalla so powerful. Not because it promised paradise, but because it helped warriors believe they could escape the fate that swallowed everyone else.
For them, Valhalla was a symbol of glory, a way to justify violence, conquest, and early death. But the average Viking? They were more concerned with family, with the harvest, with survival. Their idea of the afterlife wasn't eternal war. It was peace with the kin, a reunion with the dead, a rest from hardship. So, did they believe? The answer is complex. Yes, Valhalla was known, it existed in the culture, but belief in it? That depended on who you were, how you lived, and what kind of death you expected. For the everyday Norseman or woman, Valhalla was more legend than destination. A story, a hope, a banner for the few.
Others knew better, but kept the lie alive anyway. Because when your world is chaos, a beautiful myth can be more powerful than any sword. What if Valhalla was never about the afterlife at all? What if it was really about being remembered? Because to the Vikings, death wasn't the end. Oblivion was. Being forgotten was worse than Helheim, worse than exile, worse than even dishonor. That's why they carved stories into stones, why they sang of fallen warriors in sagas, why they passed down names, bloodlines, reputations. In Norse belief, fame was a second soul. It could outlive your body, your family, even your tribe. And so when a Viking fought bravely or died gloriously, he wasn't just chasing Valhalla, he was chasing immortality through memory. To be remembered was to live forever. They called it Luf, eternal renown, the echo of your name across generations, the strength of your deeds retold in firelit halls. And Valhalla? That was the metaphor for that fame. A hall where the worthy are remembered forever, where their stories are sung by the gods themselves. Not everyone could win gold, not everyone could die a noble death, but anyone could become legend if they were brave enough to live loudly and die with their name in someone else's mouth. Legacy over afterlife. When you strip away the myths, when you look past the magic and gods and Valkyries, you find something deeply human, a need to matter, a fear of being erased, a desperate hope that when your bones are dust, your name still lives. And that, in many ways, was the true purpose of Valhalla. Not a golden palace in the clouds, but the idea that someone, somewhere, will remember who you were. So after all the myth, the mystery, and the manipulation, what was Valhalla really? A heaven? A battlefield? A lie? Maybe it was none of those, and maybe it was all of them. Because Valhalla wasn't just a place, it was a promise. A promise that death could be more than just the end, that suffering had purpose, that bravery would be rewarded. In a world of freezing winters, endless war, and early graves, the Norse needed something to believe in, something bigger than fear, stronger than fate. Valhalla gave them that.
Even if they didn't all expect to get there, even if they feared Helheim more than they hoped for heaven, even if the myth was twisted by kings and priests, it still mattered. Because Valhalla wasn't about where your body went.
It was about how you lived and how you'd be remembered. It inspired courage. It gave meaning to chaos. It whispered, "Die well, and you won't die alone." And that's the truth most people miss. The power of Valhalla was never in whether it was real, but in the fact that it made people believe they could be eternal. Valhalla may not have existed in the sky, but it existed in the minds of warriors, in the stories we still tell, and in the names we refuse to forget.